My name is Emily Carter, and the night my husband forgot I existed was the night I stopped being his wife. It was a cold November evening in Chicago, and I was standing outside a restaurant called the Maple Room, my fingers trembling around my phone as I reread the message he had sent me just 2 hours earlier. Reservation for 2. 7:30 p.m. Don't be late. Tonight matters. Tonight matters. I smiled bitterly at those words. Because I had been sitting there for 1 hour and 17 minutes, and Daniel never showed up. Not a call. Not a text. Nothing. I remember watching couples walk past me, laughing, holding hands, living lives that looked so effortless. And I kept wondering, when did my life stop looking like that? When did my marriage become something I had to beg to feel? I finally paid for the untouched wine and stepped out into the freezing Chicago air. My heels clicked against the sidewalk as I walked alone, wrapping my coat tighter around myself. I told myself he was just busy. Daniel was a corporate attorney. Busy was normal. But forgotten? That was new. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe I had just refused to see it before. When I got home to our condo in River North, the lights were off. Of course they were. I stepped inside, the silence greeting me like an old friend. Our home was beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. Marble countertops. Designer furniture. It looked like the kind of life people envied, but it didn't feel like a home. It felt like a museum dedicated to a marriage that had quietly died. I sat on the couch, staring at my phone. 7:58 p.m. 8:42 p.m. 9:16 p.m. Still nothing. My chest tightened, but not in the way it used to. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I was empty. And that terrified me more than anything. Because when you stop feeling pain, it means something inside you has already given up. Around 11:30 p.m., I heard the door unlock. Daniel walked in like nothing had happened. He loosened his tie, glanced at me briefly, and said, "You're still up? Still up?" I stared at him, trying to process how casually he had just erased me. "I went to the restaurant," I said quietly. He froze for half a second. Then he frowned. "Oh, that was tonight. That was tonight." For words. For words that shattered 11 years of love. I felt something crack inside my chest, but my voice stayed calm. "You made the reservation." He sighed, annoyed. "Emily, I had a long day. I forgot. It's not a big deal." Not a big deal. I nodded slowly. Not a big deal. Maybe he was right. Maybe the moment you realize your husband doesn't care anymore isn't a big deal. Maybe it's just the moment you realize you deserve better. He walked past me toward the bedroom like the conversation was over. Like I was over. And that's when I noticed it. The smell. It wasn't his cologne. It was something softer. Sweeter. Perfume. Not mine. My heart started pounding, but I said nothing. Not yet. Because deep down, I wasn't ready for the answer. I sat there long after he fell asleep, staring at the Chicago skyline, wondering how I had gone from being the love of someone's life to being someone they forgot to come home to. And I need to ask you something. Have you ever stayed in a relationship longer than you should have just because you were hoping the person you fell in love with would come back? Because that night, I made a decision. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't confront him. I did something much more dangerous. I started paying attention. And what I discovered over the next few weeks destroyed everything I thought I knew about my husband. But it also gave me something else. Something I never thought I would need. A reason to disappear from his life. Without him even realizing what he lost. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. Marriage changes people. Life gets busy. Distance happens. That's what everyone says. But something inside me had already woken up, and it refused to go back to sleep. The next morning, Daniel kissed my forehead before leaving for work. It was the same kiss he'd given me for years. Automatic. Meaningless. "Big meeting today," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. "I might be late." I smiled softly. Of course. I watched him leave from the floor-to-ceiling windows of our condo, my coffee growing cold in my hands as his black Audi disappeared into traffic below. And for the first time in 11 years, I wondered where he was really going. Not his office, not his meetings, but the places he never told me about. The thought made my stomach turn. I hated who I was becoming. Suspicious, quiet, observing. But I couldn't stop. Because once you notice something is wrong, you start noticing everything. Like how he started taking his phone everywhere. Even to the shower. Like how he smiled at his screen but never at me. Like how he began working late 3, sometimes 4 nights a week. It wasn't sudden. It was careful, gradual, strategic. And that made it worse. Because it meant this wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. A few days later, I was in downtown Chicago, walking near Millennium Park. The cold air bit at my cheeks as people rushed past me, living their lives, unaware that mine was quietly falling apart. I stopped at a crosswalk when I saw something that made my heart stop. Daniel's car, across the street, parked. My breath caught. His office was in the opposite direction. I told myself there had to be an explanation. There always was. I don't remember deciding to follow it. My feet just moved, step by step, closer, closer, until I saw the building. It wasn't an office. It was a boutique hotel. The Hawthorne House. My hands started shaking. No. No, no, no. This wasn't happening. I stood there for 10 minutes, frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. Then I saw him, Daniel, walking out of the hotel doors. And he wasn't alone. She was beautiful, younger than me, long dark hair, her hand resting comfortably on his arm, like it belonged there, like she belonged there. He smiled at her, not the polite smile he gave me, not the tired smile, but the real one, the one I hadn't seen in years. And in that moment, everything inside me went silent. No screaming, no crying, just silence. Because the worst kind of heartbreak isn't loud. It's quiet. It's the quiet realization that you've been replaced. And no one even told you. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough to watch him kiss her goodbye. Long enough to watch him drive away. Long enough to feel 11 years collapse into nothing. That night, he came home at 9:12 p.m. He looked at me and smiled. Long day. I smiled back. Me too. And for the first time in my life, I lied to my husband. That night, while he slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling in the darkness. My heart wasn't breaking anymore. It was changing, hardening, becoming something new. Because I realized something important. Daniel thought I was weak. He thought I was blind. He thought I would never leave. And that was his first mistake. But his biggest mistake was underestimating the woman who knew him better than anyone else. Because if he wanted to lie to me, I was going to let him. If he wanted to betray me, I was going to let him. And when the time was right, I was going to take everything he loved and walk away smiling. He just didn't know it yet. But the woman sleeping next to him was already planning her escape. And this time, I wasn't the one who was going to lose everything. The realization didn't make me feel powerful. It made me feel calm. And that calm scared me. Because I wasn't reacting anymore. I was planning. The next morning, I woke up before Daniel. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, studying my reflection. Same face. Same eyes. But something was different. I didn't look like his wife anymore. I looked like a stranger. And maybe that was exactly what I needed to become. He couldn't fight what he didn't recognize. Morning, he mumbled from the bed. I turned, smiling softly. Morning. He had no idea. No idea that I had seen him. No idea that every word he said now meant nothing. No idea that every lie was digging his grave deeper. Over the next 2 weeks, I became the perfect wife. I cooked his favorite meals. I asked about his day. I laughed at his stories. I even touched his arm when he spoke. And every time he relaxed more, he stopped being careful. That was his second mistake. Because the more comfortable he became, the more he revealed. Passwords he used carelessly. Phone calls he took on the balcony. Late nights that became overnight business trips. And I watched. I listened. I learned. One afternoon, while he was in the shower, his phone lit up on the kitchen counter. I wasn't planning to check it. Not yet. But then I saw the name. Sophia. My chest tightened. My fingers hovered over the screen. I could walk away. Pretend. Stay safe in denial. But denial had already cost me 11 years. I picked it up. The message was simple. I miss you already. Last night meant everything. My hands went cold. Last night. He told me he was in Milwaukee. At a conference. Another lie. I opened their conversation. Photos. Hundreds of messages. Plans. Promises. Hearts. And then I saw the one that destroyed whatever hope I had left. I can't wait until the divorce is done. Then we won't have to hide anymore. Divorce. He was planning to leave me. He just hadn't told me yet. I stood there in the kitchen, his phone in my hand, my entire marriage collapsing in silence. But I didn't cry. Not anymore. Because something else had replaced the pain. Clarity. That night, I sat across from him at dinner. He was telling me a story about his coworker, laughing, relaxed, living in his lie. And I realized something. He thought he was in control. He thought he was the one deciding when everything would end. But he was wrong. Because I had something he didn't. The truth. And the truth was power. The next morning after he left, I made a phone call. My hands were steady. My voice was calm. Hello, the woman answered. Law offices of Patricia Miller. I took a breath. Hi. My name is Emily Carter. I'd like to schedule a consultation. There was a pause. Of course. What is this regarding? I looked out at the Chicago skyline. At the life I had built. At the life he thought he could take from me. Divorce. Saying the word didn't break me. It freed me. Over the next few days, I learned things about my husband he never thought I would know. His finances. His accounts. His secrets. And the biggest surprise of all, he had been moving money. Slowly. Carefully. Into a separate account. Preparing for his new life. Preparing to leave me with nothing. I smiled when I found out. Because he wasn't the only one preparing anymore. One night, he came home late again. He kissed my cheek. I love you, he said. The words sounded empty. Foreign. I smiled back. I love you too. And, for the first time since I met him, I didn't mean it. Because I wasn't his wife anymore. I was the woman who was about to change his life forever. He thought he was walking toward his future. He had no idea. He was walking straight into his ending. And in just a few days, I was going to make sure he felt exactly what I felt. Loss. Shock. And the terrifying realization that the person he underestimated the most was the one who held the final move. And he never even saw it coming. The morning I decided to end my marriage started like every other morning. Quiet. Ordinary. Deceptive. Daniel stood in the bedroom, adjusting his tie in the mirror. Another late night, he said casually. Client dinner. I nodded, sitting on the edge of the bed. Of course. Client dinner. We both knew it was a lie. The difference was, he didn't know that I knew. He walked over and kissed my forehead. I'll see you tonight. I smiled. I'll be here. But that was the last lie I ever told him. Because I wasn't going to be there. Not anymore. The moment the door closed behind him, I stood up and looked around the condo. Our condo. The place I had once believed was forever. Sunlight poured through the massive windows, illuminating every corner. Every memory. Every lie. I didn't cry. I simply walked into the closet and picked up the suitcase I had packed 3 nights earlier. I had already moved half of my things out. He never noticed. That hurt more than anything. 11 years of my life. And he didn't notice when I disappeared piece by piece. By noon, I was done. I stood in the empty living room one last time. And that's when my phone buzzed. A message from him. Dinner might run late. Don't wait up. I stared at the screen. And for the first time, I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was over. I didn't reply. Instead, I placed the envelope on the kitchen counter, right where he would see it. His name written across the front. Daniel. Inside were the divorce papers.
Signed, filed, and a letter.
My final words to the man who had once been my everything. I left the keys beside it. Then I walked out the door. And I never looked back. He called me 23 times that night. I didn't answer. He texted, "Emily, what is this? Emily, where are you? Emily, please call me. Please." That word meant nothing now. The next morning, I finally answered. "Hello," I said calmly. His voice was shaking. "You left." It wasn't a question. It was disbelief. "Yes," I said. Silence. "Then, you filed for divorce?" "Yes." His breathing grew heavier. "Why?"
Why?
I almost laughed. But I didn't. Instead, I told him the truth. "I saw you." Silence. "At the hotel. With her." The silence on the other end shattered. He started talking.
Fast. Desperate.
"It's not what you think." "Stop," I said quietly.
And he did.
Because for the first time in our marriage, he was the one listening. "I waited for you," I continued.
For years.
"I loved you when you stopped loving me. I stayed when you stopped choosing me." My voice didn't break. I deserved better. So I chose better. He whispered my name. "Emily, please."
Please.
Again. But it was too late. "I hope she makes you happy," I said. And I meant it. Not because I cared, but because I was free. I hung up. And that was the last time I ever spoke to my husband. 6 months later, I was sitting in a small cafe near Lake Michigan. Snow fell softly outside the window. Chicago was beautiful in the winter.
Cold.
But honest. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "I'm sorry."
I stared at it for a long time.
I didn't need to ask who it was. I didn't reply. Some chapters don't need responses. They just need endings. I had my own life now. My own apartment. My own peace. And the most important thing, myself. I used to think losing my marriage was the worst thing that could happen to me. But I was wrong. Losing him was the moment I found me. And the truth is, he didn't lose me the day I left. He lost me the day he made me feel alone while I was still standing right beside him. My name is Emily Carter. And this is the story of how my husband betrayed me. But in the end, I was the one who walked away with everything that mattered. My dignity, my strength, my future, and a life he would never be part of again.